Hey YouTube, Donnie Smith here, and welcome to another video in the Integra series. In this video, we're going to go through the steps to take to prep a panel for blending when you're blending into a panel and clear coating the panel, or just clear coating a panel. You know, what do you do if you just want to clear coat a panel? So we're going to show you the steps we take in this video. Now the things you're going to need to prep a panel is wax and grease remover, because you want to be certain to get all the contaminants off. You need some clean shop towels to wipe the wax and grease remover off. You need a 6-inch sander that will sand the surface, and you also need an interface pad to use with that sander so you don't sand through edges. And you're going to use 800 grit DA paper, 800 to 1000. I prefer 800. Also some gray scuff pad. Now one option is to use these foam backed hand pads, and this, if you use this method, you're not going to need the DA, the interface pads, or the 800 grit DA sandpaper, because you're using this, you'll have to sand it by hand. Now that will take a little bit longer, but it works well also. The first thing you want to do is protect your adjacent panels, because we're going to be prepping this door, get it ready to blend, and we don't want to hit the DA on the adjacent panel and scuff those, because if you do that, you're going to have to be blending into the next door, and you sure don't want that. So we're going to do that by taping off all the adjacent panel edges. That way, if your DA does slip just a little bit, I mean, you want to have good control of your DA. You don't want to be wild with it or anything, but if it does just barely hit the adjacent panel, it's going to hit the tape and not the panel. So we're going to go around these edges, protecting the panels, and also don't forget about the glass. You want to protect your glass as well, because if the DA hits the glass, it's going to scuff that glass up, and that's not going to look good. So it's going to look very unprofessional if you got scuff marks on moldings and glass and adjacent panels, or you're going to have to be repairing or replacing them. So this just takes a couple of minutes, so it's a good idea to always do that. And we're going to wipe it down with wax and grease remover just to make sure everything is good and clean before we start sanding. Because remember, if you got a clean surface to work on, that not only provides a clean surface, but it also helps your sandpaper last longer, because you don't have contaminants and silicones and waxes gumming up your paper as fast. So it's going to make the life of your sandpaper last longer. So it's going to save you money, and it's going to sand faster as well. So we're getting that all good and clean. Wipe it down. And rushing through these few steps is really going to cost you more time in the end. So just take your time, make sure everything's ready, protected, and clean before you start working on it. Save you a lot of headaches. Okay, now on the front of that door, I had just a little bit of a ripple there, so I'm going to straighten that out. Hammer on dolly technique. It wasn't bad, it just needs a little bit of straightening. Okay, now it's straight enough. It really does not need filler, but I'm going to get a DA and just sand it down to metal so I can prime it and block it, and that should be straight. It just needed a little bit of help there. It wasn't quite straight enough just to sand and paint over, but I'm going to sand it down and apply some primer. Okay, now I've got that sanded down, and now I'm going to go ahead and prep the rest of the door and the hood. Now on the door and hood, we're just blending into that. A lot of that's going to be just clear coat only. So I'm going to use an interface pad, and I'm going to use 800. I'm going to scuff basically the entire panel because we're going to clear the entire panel. So we're going to use 800. Now keep in mind, anytime you're finished sanding, like if you're using 500 for paint or 800 for clear, you want to be sure and use that interface pad. If you're leveling, like we was doing with that first area there that had some damage, you take the interface pad off, and that acts more like a block, getting it good and level and straight. But the interface pad basically kind of helps go around the curves and the contours and things like that, and you're not going to burn through your edges near as bad. And that's something you need to keep in mind whenever you're blending for paint, is you don't want to burn through your edges, because at the end of the door, we burn through an edge, that means we're going to have to prime and paint there. So be real careful with that. If you're nervous about using a DA, if you notice that you're burning through a lot, they've got foam padded hand pads that you can use, 800. You can use 800 sandpaper on a block or by hand. There's a lot of different options. The DA is a little faster than a lot of the other methods, but those foam hand pads, I really like those too. Those work really well, and you have a lot more control and a lot less chance of burning through, sanding through. And notice that I have a scuff pad there, and I'm also cleaning that pad, and that helps keep your sandpaper last longer. Every once in a while, just raise it up, run the scuff pad on top of the sandpaper, and that'll knock all the loose dust off. Now some of those are hard to get, even with that interface pad. I mean, it's hard to get into some of those concave areas, but that's where a scuff pad's going to come in later, and we're going to scuff the entire door too, and that's going to be good for, you'll do the entire panel, but especially those hard to get areas that you couldn't get real good with the DA. Now I'm going around it with the scuff pad, and like I said, concentrating on the edges and on the hard to get areas. And whenever you're sanding for a blend, you want to use the gray scuff pad. The maroon one's a little bit too coarse, and some colors you might see the scratches. So always use the gray for blend panels. And also be careful, even with your scuff pad, might hit the tape a little bit, but you don't want to be hitting your adjacent panels or anything like that, because you put scuffs on them, you're either going to have to spend time trying to buff and polish them out, or you may have to even repaint that next panel. So I'm keeping this video, showing you the full process, not speeding it up like I do some of them, just so that you can see in actual time, how much work this takes, about how long it takes. I know it's probably long to kind of sit and watch it, but really, to prep 2 panels, for blend and clear. It really does not take that long. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the hood. I am going to go around and get it all sanded with some 800 grit. First, there's that little spot on the front of the hood I'm going to have to blend in because there's a little bit of damage there. Still, it's not enough to add filler, anything like that, but it's enough I'm going to have to sand out, apply a little bit of primer, and then block it out. Okay, now I'm coming with a 800 and an interface pad. I'm going to do the entire hood. Cleaning the pad. And really keeping the pad clean, that really will allow the sandpaper to last a lot longer, which is going to save you money and save you time, because if you keep it clean, it's going to sand faster as well. Notice I'm going both directions. I'm going long ways with the hood, then I'm coming back and cross sanding it. And that just assures everything is sanded good. I always go both directions in areas where I can. Cleaning the pad again, keep it nice and clean. And again, this hood's mostly just going to be clear coat only. There's those few little spots that had just a minor damage that we're going to paint and blend into, but basically most of the door and just about all of the hood is going to be clear coat only. And the reason we're blending into these is just for a good color match so that it matches the fender well. Because if you just try to butt match these, especially with metallics, a lot of times it's not going to match perfect. And if it's not perfect, you can really tell. Even if it's just a shade off, you can tell that it is off. And if you want to learn more about blending, I will put a video down in the description, that talks more about blending and the purpose of it, why you do it and how it works. And again, you can wet sand with 800. You can use one of those foam pads by hand, use a DA. There's different ways you can do this. There's not, just one way. And some people may prefer, a little finer grit, especially the waterborne may go up to 1,000. Just keep in mind, the finer you go, the longer it's going to take. But the main key, the main point here is to whatever method you use is don't burn through the edges, so you may want to start out using one of those foam pads that you sand by hand, because those work pretty fast, not quite as fast as a DA, but you have a lot less chance of burning through whenever sanding by hand. Okay, now I'm just going to follow the same procedures I did on the door. I am going around the entire hood with the scuff pad, getting the edges really good, the hard to get areas, and making sure that they are sanded good and there's no glossy spots left. Okay, now I'm just going around getting the dirt off. I'm just using the vacuum that we have to remove a lot of it, and the reason I'm using a vacuum is because if you blow it off, it just gets a lot more dirt in the shop, which could eventually end up in your paint booth. So anytime you can vacuum or some way to get all that dust and dirt off, or the majority of it off, without blowing it all over the shop, it's going to be a better way to do that. Even if you have a shop vac or something like that, you can use to vacuum up a big portion of the dust. Okay, now I'm going to use some wax and grease remover to make sure the surface is nice and clean, because I'm going to get ready to prime that spot on the door and those two small spots on the hood. I'm going to prime those so I can block them out, and then it'll be ready to paint. Now whenever I get this primer and start priming, I want you to keep in mind I would just want to get the area that needs prime, so I'm going to kind of try to keep the prime area small, because the bigger the prime area is, that means the bigger area I'm going to have to blend. So I kind of try to keep that small, adjust my gun where it doesn't shoot out, quite as much overspray, kind of a small pattern, so that I can just spray just those spots, block them out, and then it'll be ready to paint. Because if I get primer halfway down the door, that means I'm going to have to paint halfway down the door. So I'm going to mask off this areas that need primed, and I'm not going to mask the whole car off, because like I said, I'm going to shoot at a lower pressure, smaller pattern, and I'm not going to get overspray all over the car. Using a back masking method here, and I use that a lot. Works out really good. And that's basically just where I apply the tape to the back part of the panel. And the sticky part's going to be facing up, and that'll give you something to tape your masking paper to. And again, I know this video is longer than a lot of them, but some of you said that you'd like to see more of the actual time instead of me speeding it up a lot and or cutting some of it out. In this video, I decided just to kind of keep it as a actual time, so you can kind of see the process that it takes and how long this really takes. So I'm masking that door edge off so I don't get a lot of overspray, inside of that jam area. And I would recommend, until you become more comfortable with, kind of knowing how to set your gun and your overspray, it would not take much longer just to drop a piece of plastic over the entire car. Okay, now I've got some self-etch primer, and I'm going to spray a coat of that on the bare metal. And notice I sprayed on the paper first. You know, you always want to do that to make sure that it's spraying right, because you don't want clumps or anything coming out, because sometimes you might have a chunk come out. So kind of spray some on the paper just to make sure it's spraying correctly. And notice I'm not putting it on real heavy, just kind of putting a light coat on, just enough to coat the bare metal. I allowed that to flash, and now I'm going to spray some primer surfacer on there. So I'm adjusting the gun where it doesn't spray a lot of material out, a narrow pattern, fan pattern, you know, where I don't have odor spray going all over the shop. Just going to spray these few spots just to give me something to block out, to make sure it is perfectly level and there's no imperfections left behind. And I also notice I'm shooting towards the outside of the door. You know, I'm angling it towards the outside. I'm not shooting towards the door where all the overspray can be landing on the door area, because anywhere overspray gets, you're going to have to paint that, and we're trying to keep this prime area small. Now I did cut out the flash times, so be sure that you allow it to flash in between coats. If you don't, that can cause a lot of problems. Well, we have the car primed, and now we can block it and wash it and get it in the booth. So that pretty well wraps it up for this video. I would like to talk just a little bit about blending and clear coat only. And this kind of gets more into the technical side of it. If you're DIY, this probably is not going to matter to you. But if you're kind of wanting to wonder how do they come up with the times for that? I mean, we all know, like for fenders, each panel has a specific time that CCC1 or whatever estimating system you're using, you know, it gives you so many hours. For example, that door, let's say it gave 3 hours. So what do you get just for blending that? You don't get the full blend time, or you don't get the full paint time, because you're just blending. So the way they figure that, if that door said, you know, 3 hours, well, you're going to get 50% of that. So you're going to get 1.5 hours to blend that door, as opposed to the full 3 hours. Now, there are cases where you're going to do clear coat only. You're not blending. And that's like, you know, a lot of the quarter panels where they go up to the roof, there's no break line. And a lot of the paint manufacturers recommend not to do a solvent blend there, that you wait until there's a break line. So in this case, if you're doing a quarter panel, you're going to have to go up past the roof, you're going to have to clear coat the roof, and then you got to go down and clear coat the other quarter panel. And there really hasn't been a time for that you can go by in the estimating guide. It's been kind of a judgment thing, but there is a calculation that they have came up with, and that's 40%. So let's say the roof panel pays an hour, and the other quarter panel pays an hour. Of course, it's going to be more than that. But if the roof said 1 hour, well, you're going to get 40% of that, so you're going to get 0.4. Same with the quarter panel. So if it's 3 hours on the roof, you're going to get 40% of that. So that's kind of how that's figured out. Now, whether that's fair or not, I don't know, but that's the calculations they came up with, because really, in my opinion, it takes just as much time to prep a blend panel or just clear coat. I mean, it takes the same amount of sanding and, you know, time in my opinion. But, you know, that's just my opinion. That's not what they have agreed on to pay us, you know, as far as insurance and things like that. So I just wanted to mention that real quick, just to kind of give you an idea of how they come up with the times for blending and how they come up with the times for clear coat only. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure and give us a thumbs up, give us a like, you know, share this video with your friends, subscribe to us if you haven't, and remember, if something's worth doing, do your best and have a blast doing it. Thanks for watching, take care, and we'll see you in the next video.